Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. You guys know the drill, right? You send us the stuff that's got you thinking, the articles, the books, whatever it is.
And we roll up our sleeves and, yeah, we kind of like dive in and try to unpack it all.
And hopefully you come away from it with a few, nuggets of wisdom that you can actually use.
Exactly. Actionable insights, not just a bunch of, theoretical fluff.
Right. And this time around, you've really thrown us a curveball. I mean, you send over excerpts from The Art of War.
Sun Tzu.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the big one. Translated by Lionel Giles back in 1910.
Uh,
But uh, this is like the oldest military treatise in the world, right?
as far as we know, yeah. It's been around for centuries, millennia even, which tells you something, right? I mean, this stuff has stood the test of time.
For sure. And look, I know what you're thinking, right? I'm not a general. I'm not planning any military campaigns. But that's exactly why this is so fascinating, because the principles here, they go way beyond the battlefield.
They're about strategy, understanding competition, human nature. It's all in there.
It's like a blueprint for navigating any kind of challenge or conflict. So let's jump in. Let's start at the beginning. Chapter 1.
Sun Tzu doesn't waste any time. He comes right out and says, the art of war is of vital importance to the state, a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected.
Wow. Okay, so right off the bat, he's setting the stakes pretty high, right?
He's not messing around.
But let's think about this for a moment. Forget about the state for a second. Let's say you're working on a big project. You're building a business. You're trying to achieve a personal goal.
Anything that really matters to you.
Doesn't that same sense of vital importance apply? I mean, understanding what you're up against, having a strategy, it's not just an academic exercise.
It's the difference between success and failure.
Exactly. And Sun Tzu goes on to outline these 5 constant factors that a general or anyone in a leadership position needs to consider.
He calls them the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and method and discipline.
Okay, let's break those down, starting with moral law. What is that exactly?
Well, in Sun Tzu's time, it was about the ruler having the mandate of heaven, that the people felt their needs were being met, they trusted their leader. That created a powerful, unified force.
Interesting. So it's not just about ethics in the modern sense?
Not exactly. It's more about that shared purpose, that alignment between the leader and the people they're leading.
I see. And think about how often projects fail, not because of technical issues, but because of internal conflict.
Lack of trust, lack of belief in the mission.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like the moral law is missing. Okay, next up we've got heaven. Now, we're not talking about like divine intervention here, are we?
No, no. This is about the external environment, the things you can't control,
The weather.
the seasons, day and night, hot and cold.
Mhm.
Think of it in a modern context as market trends, economic cycles, global events.
The stuff that can throw a wrench in your plans no matter how good they are.
Exactly. You got to be aware of it. You got to be ready to adapt.
Okay, then we have Earth. What's that all about?
This is about the physical landscape, the terrain, the distances.
In a business sense, that could be your competitive landscape.
Right. Who are your rivals? What resources do you have access to? What are the strengths and weaknesses of your position in the market?
It's about understanding the lay of the land so you can choose your battles wisely. Okay, next we have the commander. Pretty self-explanatory, right?
Well, Sun Tzu is very specific about the qualities a good commander should possess: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, strictness.
So it's not just about being tough and giving orders.
It's about character. It's
Oh.
about competence. It's about having the right mix of qualities to inspire and lead effectively.
And finally, method and discipline. This is where the rubber meets the road, right?
This is about the operational side of things: organization, rank structure, supply lines, how you manage your resources.
It's the systems and processes that keep everything running smoothly.
Without them, even the best strategy can fall apart.
So, wow, okay, that's a lot to unpack. But think about it, right? These 5 factors, even if you're not leading an army, they apply to so many situations in life.
They really do.
So I want you to ask yourself, are you paying enough attention to the moral law within your team? Are you being realistic about the heaven, the external forces that are at play?
Yeah.
Do you truly understand the earth, the competitive environment you're operating in? And how would you evaluate the commander in your situation, whether that's yourself or someone else? And are your methods and discipline up to par?
It's a framework for analyzing any kind of challenge.
Absolutely. Okay, so now let's talk about victory. because that's ultimately what we're all striving for, right?
Right. And Sun Tzu has some interesting things to say about that.
In chapter 4, he says, the good fighters of old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat and then waited for an opportunity of defeating the enemy.
Think about that. It's not about being passive. It's about building an unassailable position, minimizing your vulnerabilities.
It's like before you even think about attacking, you make sure your defenses are rock solid.
Exactly. You secure your core. You build that foundation.
It's risk mitigation. In business, it'd be like making sure you have strong cash reserves, a loyal customer base, before you launch some huge expansion.
Makes sense.
But then get this. In chapter 3, he says, supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's interesting. That almost sounds like a contradiction. How do you win without fighting?
It's about strategy. It's about understanding your opponent so well, anticipating their moves so effectively that their will to resist is broken before any actual conflict occurs.
Wow.
It's like a masterful negotiation where you've already won before you even sit down at the table.
So in business, that could be creating a product or service that's so compelling that competitors just can't keep up.
Or building such strong partnerships that your position is unassailable.
It's making the competition irrelevant. I like that.
It's the ultimate chess move.
And speaking of competition, Sun Tzu talks a lot about the importance of knowledge and adaptability.
In a constantly changing environment, you have to be flexible.
In chapter 6, he says, so in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and to strike at what is weak. In warfare, there are no constant conditions.
What works today might not work tomorrow. You have to be able to assess the situation, identify strengths and weaknesses, and adjust your strategy accordingly.
It's like in the market, right? Consumer preferences are always changing. You can't be stuck in your ways.
You got to be agile, you got to be learning, you got to be adapting.
And to do that, you need information. You need to know what's going on.
Which brings us to one of the most, shall we say, intriguing aspects of the art of war.
Spies.
Chapter 13. Sun Tzu lays out these 5 types of spies. Local spies, inward spies, converted spies, doomed spies, and surviving spies.
It's like a whole intelligence network.
But this isn't just about espionage in the traditional sense, right? I mean, how can we apply this to, let's say, business or even personal life? Think of it as different sources of information. Local spies, that's your market research, your customer feedback, understanding the ground level of your industry. Inward spies, those are the insights you can get from people who've worked for your competitors. Converted spies, maybe that's analysts or consultants who've come around to your way of thinking.
And doomed spies.
Well, metaphorically, that could be a controlled experiment you run. You release a limited product, you see how your competitors react.
And surviving spies.
Those are the people who bring you back that vital intelligence from the front lines.
So it's about having a multi-layered approach to information gathering. It's about recognizing that knowledge is power.
And that the more you know, the better equipped you are to make the right decisions.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Sun Tzu, I will leave you with this thought. We've talked about tactics, we've talked about strategy. But in chapter 6, Sun Tzu says something really profound. He says, all men can see the tactics whereby I conquer, but what none can see is the strategy out of which victory is evolved. It's like, people might see the moves you're making, but do they understand the thinking behind them? The bigger picture.
It's a good question to ask yourself.
Are you so focused on the individual actions that you're losing sight of the overall strategy? Because ultimately, that's what will determine your success.
It's about having that vision, that long-term plan.
And making sure that every move you make is taking you closer to your goal.
Otherwise, you're just reacting. You're not in control.
Food for thought, right?
Definitely.
Sun Tzu. Still relevant after all these years.
Timeless wisdom.
All right, that's our deep dive for today. We'll catch you next time.
See you there.